You're watching Lit Sports Online. This is the UFC 239 Jones vs. Santos recap video. We're going to get straight into it with the prelims, right, Pat?
Yes, sir.
We'll start with Claudia Gadelha defeating Randa Markos in a unanimous decision.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention this one because I like to see. I would have liked to see either woman headed towards the top of the division. A win over either. They're both highly ranked, so a win would have put either of them towards the top. But it's nice to see Claudia Gadelha headed back towards the top of the division. She's fought for a title a couple times. She is just kind of a perennial top contender. Has fallen on some hard times. She's kind of split wins and losses in her last 5 fights. That being said, her last couple losses were to top tier fighters in the division, and Nina Ansaroff, who just lost her number 1 contenders fight to Tatiana Suarez, who's kind of like the monster, like boogeyman of the division because she's such a good wrestler. And her other loss before that was to Jessica Andrade, the current champ. So, no shame in a loss to either woman, but it's nice to see her headed back towards the top. She wants to call for a fight with Yoni and Jacek, the former champ, who she's fought twice already. She feels that she's owed a third fight. She thinks they're 1-1, even though Jacek won both fights on paper. Nonetheless, I just wanted to point out, good win for Gadelha. She's a phenomenal fighter. I love watching her work, and I'm glad to see her headed back to the top.
Good win indeed. Moving on to the next prelim, we got Arnold Allen defeating Gilbert Melendez via a unanimous decision.
Yeah, and this is one of the first of 3 fights where we have big name guys who are probably towards the end of their tenure fighting at the top level who lost to up-and-coming young fighters. So Gil Melendez is a guy who was Strikeforce champion, just a huge name. He comes from the same camp as the Diaz brothers, so he's a phenomenal fighter. Great wrestler, great grappler, great striking, but just ran into a young, hungry guy in Arnold Allen who had a better striking game and just, kind of controlled the whole fight and went his way to a unanimous decision. So to me, this is that point that you see in a lot of kind of older fighters' careers where you start to see them go downhill. He's lost a couple, but he hasn't, been thrashed. He hasn't taken a ton of damage yet for Melendez, but you start. This is, I fear that this is the beginning of the BJ Penn slide where he's going to lose 7 in a row and just get fights based on his name. I'd like to see Gil retire. He's not going to be a top contender anymore. They're feeding him young guys because they can either say, oh, he beat this young, hungry lion, or look at this young lion who just beat this giant name to propel their career to the top. I don't want to see Gil go down that path. He's too good a guy, too fun of a fighter to watch just sell himself out for younger people to propel their career.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's an age apex for every athlete in every sport, and I'm not sure we know exactly what that is for UFC, but there is a certain age where you start to go downhill, and law of averages says more guys that are this age group are going to lose more fights.
Yep.
So, I've seen in UFC and MMA in general, there are some guys that can fight well into the 30s and still show quality, and then there's guys that really start to lose a step. And you're right, we're seeing this theme where more and more of these older fighters are losing to the young upcoming guys. So, interesting trend to keep an eye on.
And it continues even more so in the next fight that we're going to talk about with Thiago Sanches.
So, in that next fight, it was Michael Chiesa defeating Thiago Sanchez by, again, a unanimous decision.
So, this is Chiesa coming up to welterweight for the first time from lightweight. I think it's his first fight. It might be his second one. But anyway, he has just looked phenomenal at the new weight. He doesn't have to cut a lot of weight. He has more energy. He's quicker. He just feels better throughout his fight camp. And he put a dominant performance on, again, an older guy who has a huge name. Thiago Sanchez has been around since the first Ultimate Fighter. He won the first season of the Ultimate Fighter in, 1983 or something. And is just still in the UFC trying to fight top contenders. It's just not going to happen. He's kind of an insane person.
So this guy's old as dirt.
Yeah, I mean, as far as MMA is concerned, he's super old. If he's not 40, he is 1 year away. He might be like 42. He's, before this fight, is going around telling everybody, I'm an anomaly of the fight game, and I found the secrets to everlasting youth. It's like, did you? Or are you just an insane person that just get, like...
It sounds like he's just chasing a record for, like, oldest dude fighting in the UFC or whatever, like...
Yeah, kind of. And he's still a good fighter, and he's still going to beat a lot of the dudes in the UFC. He's still going to beat, like, you know, the bottom half of the division. He's not going to beat your top 10 guys, maybe, but he'll still beat a lot of people. And that's the problem, is you can have guys who, like, this fight, it's such an ego-driven thing. It's such an individual thing, and it's so, like, your ego's so tied to it, and that's how you identify as, for a huge part of your life, as a fighter. And when it gets to the point where you should probably retire, it's hard to do that, you know? Even when you're a guy like Thiago Santos, who's so good, he's a phenomenal grappler, but when you see him go up against a Michael Chiesa, who is younger and is a fantastic grappler in his own right, and when you see Chiesa dominate Sanchez at his strength, that's what gets me, right? Is when Sanchez can go out there and bull rush people and just be the mad bulldog that he's been his whole career and make it a dirty fight, that's one thing. But when his strength is grappling and wrestling and control, and you see somebody go out and do that to him, that's where you should start to say, okay, maybe he should retire. Because you don't want to have to see an older fighter go out and get into those brawls. You don't want to see a guy who's 40 go out and just trade punches with a young dude. And if his only way out of that is controlling people with grappling, and now he's getting dominated by younger, bigger guys who are grappling centric, he either needs to he needs to find something else. You know, it's just, he's going to get hurt at this point. It's just doing damage to him. It doesn't need to be done. He's a legend of the sport. He can go on. He can coach, do plenty of other things. He's not going to beat the top of the division.
Yeah, I mean, that's the natural progression, is if you want to stay in a sport, get into coaching. Get into, like, helping dudes train. Like, you know, don't give yourself CTE because you want to stay fighting or playing football for, like, the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that being said, fantastic performance by Chiesa, because Thiago Sanchez is a phenomenal grappler, and you can still see fighters who are way past their prime still do fantastically in grappling, and Chiesa is a phenomenal grappler, and I'm excited to see him in the 170-pound division because he looks better, he looks healthier, he looks quicker, and he's just putting on better performances, and I think that he has a destiny towards the top of the division. I think he needs to vastly improve his striking game because I don't think his grappling alone is good enough to carry him through fighters like Ben Askren and Kamaru Usman and Tyron Woodley. So I think he needs to improve his striking game, but I think he can compete at the top of that 170-pound division, and I think it's a great move for him, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here.
Well, we'll get to Ben Askren in a second, but first, last prelim, Jan Blachowicz defeating Luke Rockhold in a second-round knockout.
Yes. This was an upset, which is interesting, because Blachowicz has been beating a lot of guys in the light heavyweight division. He ran into Thiago Santos, and Santos was able to finish him and put him away and work his way to a title shot, the main event of this card. But Rockhold is a former middleweight champ coming up to 205 from 185 for the first time. He's just phenomenal in general, and everybody kind of thought he was going to come up to this division and it was going to be where he found his most success. They thought, you know, he's a giant guy, and everybody thought it would just be easier for him to not have to cut that weight anymore, and he would have better performances. That didn't happen. He didn't, you know, a lot of times you see guys go up and they look faster, they look sharper, they look, you know, quicker on their feet, you know, better footwork. That didn't really seem to be the case with Luke Rockhold. He kind of was the same Luke Rockhold. He had the same, you know, kind of weird tendencies he has where he likes to drop his hands and keep his chin up. He likes to go straight back instead of circling out. And that's eventually what led to him losing, unfortunately. You know, he ran into Blachowicz, who is just a phenomenal striker with a lot of power in his hands, and he was able to catch him. Luke tends to he's a southpaw, so he leaves his lead right hand down and backs straight up and leaves his chin up, and Blachowicz caught him. And it's not the first time it's happened. We've seen him head kicked by Vitor Belfort. We saw Yoel Romero catch him. We saw, Michael Bisping catch him to take the title from him. So it's one of those things where you see this flaw that he keeps getting, paying for, that he doesn't really change that much. So you got to wonder what's going on. And one of the things a lot of people think is going on, or that I'm guessing is going on, is he's got so much else going on. Dude just finished, they wanted to have him fight a few months ago, short notice, against somebody else, but he was too busy doing a Ralph Lauren photo shoot. So, all right, man. You're a beautiful, beautiful man who dated Demi Lovato and looks like an Adonis, and are shooting Ralph Lauren, spreads, but you're like, nah, I'm going to go get my head knocked in by some crazy Russian dude instead. Obviously he thought he was going to win, and he claims that he's all for the title shot and this is the only thing he wants, but of all the fighters in the UFC that are going for title shots, they're not out there doing ads for modeling agencies, They're in the gym every day. Guarantee you Jan Blachowicz is not out there going, how can I make a little extra money on the side? He's going, nope, I'm heads down in the gym, training every single day. And so I think Rockhold's one of those guys who is kind of Ronda, what a lot of people think happened with Ronda Rousey, just too much going on outside of the fight game, a little distracted, just going to catch up with you eventually. That being said, it's not a bad place to be. You start losing, instead of getting your head knocked in, just go be a model, dude. Not only are you a model, but you can legit walk around the entire modeling, industry like a badass, because you could literally kick anybody's ass. How many other models out there could say, I was the middleweight champ of the world?
That's a good point.
And I beat Chris Weidman and all these legends of the sport. Go do that, man. Go do that.
But could we please move on to the real main event fights?
Yeah.
I've got to talk about the fact that Jorge Masvidal defeated Ben Askren with a flying knee in the fastest knockout in UFC history. Official time 5 seconds. Whammy, whammy, whammy.
Oh,
that was a hell of a finish. What do you think?
Dude, it's one of those moments where you're just in a room of people and half the room is just ah! And the other half of the room is it's both incredible and terrifying and exciting and just...
The crowd reaction was crazy.
Yeah. If you saw the commentator's booth, you have John Anik screaming. All Joe Rogan can say is, oh! Oh! Anik's going, Jorge Masvidal! And Paul Felder is sitting there you got the full range of emotions. You get complete elation to dumbfounded excitement to what just happened. You know what I mean? And like you said, it's the fastest KO in UFC history. I think the official time is 5 seconds, and that's only because the ref was not quick enough. Really, it was about 3 seconds. And then Askren fell, and Masvidal was able to land 2 more shots while he was out on the ground before the ref stopped it. I don't know what to say. It's...
Well, that's the thing, is those 2 shots weren't even necessary. It was kind of all right, you really could have called it, but as a ref, that's kind of hard.
Well, it's not that the ref didn't try to call it. It's so that he was just, he's 6 feet away. He couldn't jump in before Masvidal got those 2 shots in. And they asked Masvidal about that in interviews in the post-fight press conference. And his answer was, well, those shots were necessary because my job is to hit the other guy until the ref stops the fight. I hit him until the ref got in between, then I stopped. That was it. And then there's another point where somebody's like, did you really have to throw those last 2 shots? He's like, yeah, I thought he was going to get up. And then just kind of laughs a little bit. You're like, oh, you dick. He wasn't getting up, man. He wasn't getting up. But it's just an insane outcome. Askren was the favorite for good reason, because Askren was to this point a completely and utterly dominant force of wrestling. He would just go in and take everyone down and control them and ground and pound them, and nobody could do anything about it.
So, was this just a case of Askren being a little too over-aggressive and playing into the hand of his opponent? Because, I mean, if you think about it, would he have stood a better chance if he just held back and, like, approached a little slower?
Well, I think what it is, if you watch the fight, Askren didn't really come out guns blazing like Masvidal did. Masvidal ran to the middle of the octagon and jumped in through the knee. Askren was kind of walking out and just reacted to the fact the other dudes just sprinted at him. And so, in almost anybody, you know, they're going to revert to what they're most comfortable with if they're presented with a situation that they're not quite sure how to handle, right? And somebody's sprinting at you, you're not quite sure how to handle it. You get your boxer, if somebody's sprinting at him, boxer's probably just going to go, duck his head and throw an overhand right. Askren, who's an Olympic level wrestler, went to his bread and butter. He just said, this dude's sprinting at me, I know what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to catch him and I'm going to take him down, I'm going to control him. Because chances are, most times when that happens, and most times when you see guys throw flying knees at wrestlers, which is not uncommon, because people like to think a wrestler's going to go for a takedown, they're going to drop their head, I'm going to throw the knee at the same time, break their head. Which is what happened here. But that doesn't happen most of the time. So Askren's just going for the most frequently used and the most common sense and the easiest, most accessible defense to that for him, which is his wrestling. And it just didn't work out. You know, Masvidal just executed an insane move. And Masvidal planned that too. There's footage of him training that exact knee days before the fight in the UFC gym with his coaches. Like, he planned on coming out that way. And to hear him tell it, he says there are 3 outcomes to that move. A, he knocks him out. B, Askren completely avoids it and takes him down, and Masvidal says, I don't give a shit. I'm a good enough wrestler. I'll just get back up. Or C, he also takes him down, but he grazes him with the knee enough to scare him for the rest of the fight. And so if that happens, then the rest of the fight, every time Askren goes to take Masvidal down, he's going to have that second of, the knee. I need to look out for it. So it's going to mess with him. So in Masvidal's mind, he has 3 good outcomes. Knockout, mind screw, or who cares? I'll get up anyway. So it doesn't really matter at that point. And that's just the confidence that comes with being a wrestler and a fighter at the level of Jorge Masvidal. That dude has seen it all. That dude is in the background of Kimbo Slice backyard fighting videos. Dude's been just beating the shit out of people since he was 10 years old. He does not care. He's at the top of the division. He's paid his dues in the fight game like very few people have. I think he deserves a title shot. He has the fastest knockout in UFC history. Just beat a top contender, former champion of multiple other companies outside the UFC. I think we put Masvidal in a title shot. Plus, he's entertaining as hell. Watch his interviews, man. That guy just off the cuff is just real as shit.
Next fight, another one that had whammy potential. We had Amanda Nunes defeating Holly Holm in round 1 with a head kick knockout.
Yeah.
And this was for the defending the bantamweight title.
Yep. Champ. Going out there doing that champ shit. You know? Nunes... I mean... Nunes is the greatest women's fighter of all time. Yoni Jacek has the longest title reign of any woman of all time. But Nunes has beat Ronda Rousey, Chris Cyborg, Miesha Tate, Holly Holm, Valentina Shevchenko.
Basically, she's beat all the scariest fighters in those divisions.
Before Nunes beat Cyborg, Cyborg was the consensus greatest woman fighter of all time because she's terrifying. Just knocks everybody out. And then Nunes goes out there and knocks her out in the first round. And everybody says, okay, cool. There's some more challenges for you in the UFC. Holly Holm, 17 or 18-time boxing champion, professional kickboxer, former UFC champ, kicked Ronda Rousey in the head. How does Nunes fare against Holly Holm? And to me, looking at it, which is why I put money on her, if you were going to design a striking game to beat Amanda Nunes, who is kind of a little bit of a counter-striker but aggressive, big power shots, forward movement after she gets you hurt, kind of looping shots, you would design a Holly Holm who has a more movement-centric style, She's more straight down the pipe shots. She has a lot of kicks, so she fights at good length. She has some real sneaky kicks. She throws a nice question mark kick that sneaks over people's shoulders and knocks them out. She caught Betch Correia with that, caught Ronda Rousey with that. But Nunes just didn't care. Nunes came out and was a little more aggressive than I thought she'd be, and I think that was a result of Holly's game. Holly's game plan being a little different than was expected. I think Holly, you would have expected her to do exactly what I just said, kind of lateral movement more, trying to cut corners more, trying to land shots and get out of the way without backing straight up to get caught with shots. She was a little more straight line than you would think she would be. She wasn't quite as counter-striking, and Nunes just caught her. It was kind of like everybody I was with said it was a super boring fight before the end. I personally loved it because I was just watching, it's watching the two best strikers in the division, and I'm just, waiting. Eventually something's going to happen. And sure enough, it did. And Nunes caught her with a head kick, and that is not how I would have expected that fight to go. Nunes is known for, knocking people out with her fists. Holly Holm's known for head kicking people, so phenomenal outcome, and just further cements the legacy of the greatest women's fighter of all time. And just don't know why the UFC isn't marketing the fact that she's also a gay woman and is one of the greatest of all time. I just think it's great, man. She's an awesome personality. She's engaged to another UFC fighter. She knocked out Ronda Rousey and Chris Cyborg and Holly Holm and all these crazy people. And Nunes is just one of the best things to happen in the UFC in recent times. It's fantastic.
Our final fight to talk about on the card. Perhaps the most competitive Jon Jones fight yet, would you say? I mean, we had Jon Jones. He did defeat Thiago Santos, but it was a split decision to defend the light heavyweight title. A very close split decision. And, when you really think about this fight, you had Santos tearing multiple ligaments in his knee in round 1 and still finishing out the fight. And that's pretty crazy to think about in and of itself, is it not?
Dude, it's insane. Dude tore his ACL, MCL, PCL, and meniscus in his left leg in the first round. And that's his lead leg. So he typically fights orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
But he tore everything in that knee. So he had to, not only was he that knee killing him, but he had to switch stances.
So most people, athletes included, would have just been on the ground at that point.
Yeah,
wouldn't you say?
Yeah, if you're in the NBA, MLB, whatever soccer professionalism is or whatever, and you're out. You tear your MCL, done, completely done. Fighter, they don't have that time on the sideline for anybody to say anything, and the fighter's just gonna push through it anyway. They don't care. Dude fought 20 plus minutes with 0 ligaments in his knee. Not only that, but was throwing kicks and using that leg as a post to throw right kicks. Was putting all of his body weight, pivoting it on that completely torn leg and throwing kicks at Jon Jones. And also throwing kicks with that leg. And posting off it, throw punches and defend takedowns. It's crazy. To think about how crazy messed up that knee was and still watch him perform that way is amazing. And Jon Jones, I think he also injured his left leg. I don't know what his injury was. He was getting helped out of the cage by his team at the end of the fight. But, I mean, it was a close fight. The closest that I can remember in a little while. I think the only fight that I would say for Jon Jones was closer than this one was Jon Jones versus Gustafsson 1. The first time they fought. I think that was the closest fight Jon Jones has ever had. I think Jon Jones only won that fight because of basically one thing that happened in the last round. But this fight, man, was great. Both guys were successful. I personally would like to see a rematch. I don't think it's necessarily the fight was so close that an immediate rematch is warranted. But I think Thiago Santos get one more win over another guy.
Well, and I don't know if an immediate rematch would be possible since this guy's got to recover from all those torn ligaments.
Yeah, I don't think either one of those guys is coming back this year. If I had to guess, I'd say they both have at least a 6-month medical suspension. But I'm not sure yet. I haven't heard anything about that yet, or at least I haven't looked it up. So, but yeah, I mean, it was.
Well, I just know in other sports, if someone had this kind of injury, the timetable for recovery is generally like at least a year.
Yeah.
9 months to a year, something like that. So I would imagine he's going to be out for a while. But,
well,
I mean, again,
in MMA, typically the 6-month medical suspension is basically like no contact for 6 months. So it's like no sparring, no stuff like that. Definitely no competition. But so when a guy gets a 6-month medical suspension, you'll see him back in 9 months to a year or so, or something like that. That way, the guy can completely recover, get into a fight camp, get back in shape, get into a fight camp, and be fighting shape. So, I'd say we'll see both these guys in mid next year, maybe something like that. Yeah, like you said, about a year. But it was a good fight. I thought Jon Jones took a very interesting approach. I would not have expected him to fight the way he did, knowing that Santos has a black belt in Muay Thai, whatever that means. He's a phenomenal striker. And this dude has the most power out of anybody that Jon Jones has fought before. And I think that might be a part of why Jon Jones fought the way he did. He didn't try to make the fight dirty and fight against the fence a lot and do a lot of clinch work and elbow games and infighting, dirty boxing, because Santos is so powerful. And I think that one of the things that happened was early in the fight, Santos landed some shots, and I think that it changed, like, I think Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a game plan until they get hit in the head, As soon as you feel how hard that guy can hit, you're going to reconsider risking getting hit just to get a takedown. And he did get a couple takedowns. He ended up in top control a couple times. They weren't, typical just Jon Jones takedowns. And I think that for him, it was kind of a good performance in the sense that he didn't look great. He had some trouble. He got injured. He kind of barely got out with the win. But it's kind of a wake-up call, right? It's one of those things where he says he's glad he had such a close fight because, first off, he proved to himself how good he is, because Santos is a much more experienced and accomplished striker than Jon Jones is, as far as, your accolades go and your belts or whatever you want to say. So Jon Jones is kind of proud of himself he fought 25 rounds against a guy who's known as an incredible striker and came out on top. But it's a wake-up call in that he needs to be able to fight smarter. He needs to be able to avoid those situations and figure out a way past that and not have to stand for 25 minutes with a guy who's a phenomenal striker. He should have gotten the takedown. He should have, probably found a way to get it to his world and dominate the fight in his normal fashion. It was the most human we've seen him look in a while, and I think it was a fun fight to watch, and it could be a good thing for Jon Jones, but we'll see where he goes from here.
So that's going to do it for our recap video. Make sure to like and subscribe to LitTube, and we'll keep these videos coming at you.
That cannot be an outtake, Alex. I know you, and that cannot be an outtake. You son of a bitch. Okay. If you put me saying that on the internet, I will drive here and
do not put him on the fucking internet.
Ha! You'll be here Friday, then.
To superimpose